It'd be pretty easy to lose Jihad Ward in the shuffle of rotational defensive linemen, but I think we owe it to him to try our best not to. Welcome to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who make Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day, especially in the middle of June, when we're doing backstories on free agents that you forgot the Vikings even signed. Today, we're going to do another big, long entry into the Everyman series. It's Jihad Ward today. His story is harrowing and compelling, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. If you're new here, hello and welcome. This is kind of what we do in the summer. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search it out, Locked On Vikings, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find it on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. There are places in the United States that the country has left behind. Whether it's, podunk, rural, 10-person towns that nobody else really bothers to concern themselves with, or places like North Philadelphia. These are forgotten places. They're just as lively and as undeniable as the city that maybe you grew up in. But in places like North Philadelphia, huge chunks of the population sort of get stuck. And their version of the American dream, as we love to talk about here in America, is a little bit different and requires them to get out. But even if you are lucky enough to be spit out by this town that chewed you up, you still carry those scars with you. North Philadelphia is where Jihad Ward grew up, and he still talks about how he carries those scars. What he experienced there, and he's always really reticent to go into details for very understandable reasons, but he experienced all kinds of violence, gun violence. His brother was shot when he was 15 or 16 years old. He lost his brother that way. There's not a lot of other, details. I'm not exactly going to do the classic New York Times painted picture of this trauma thing, like the ESPN draft segment. I'm not going to go there. But suffice to say that Jihad Ward had it pretty rough growing up. The way he talked about it, it sounded like something you would hear from a World War I vet. He talks about it as a place where there's no hope, as a place where you can't show fear. If you show fear, it'll break you, where you have to be on your guard at all times, where you have to be tense at all times, head on a swivel all the time. And where you have to just live and reckon with the idea that your life could end at any moment, and there's not a lot that you can do about it, and you have to start having that thought at a very young age. It's the kind of thing that will scar you forever. And for somebody like Jihad Ward, who did get out of North Philadelphia, still has a lot of family there, still goes back there plenty of the time, but did manage to build a life and find success despite these circumstances, you're never really going to take that experience out of him. And in, I guess, what this episode's quest is, which is to understand Jihad Ward as more than a pile of statistics, I think that's the first thing we have to understand is not just, a kid from the hood, and the way that somebody like me, who doesn't have that experience, can only superficially try to sympathize with that. But I can't empathize with that because I haven't experienced that. So I can do my best, but I want to try to understand it in a deeper way, in that that's just going to shape who you are a little bit. And it's just going to put everything else that you struggle with into perspective. And when we go over the other things that Jihad Ward has struggled with over the course of his life, he always goes back to, yeah, but it ain't as bad as North Philly. I think that's instructive. He went to Edward Bach Technical High, which I think is a mall now. It's defunct. It went defunct while he was in college. And that's it was a vocational school. And in sophomore year, he decided to pick up football. Started out as a wide receiver or safety. I think as he filled out, he grew up, he turned to defensive end. And that's where he would end up playing for the rest of his career. But his grades were not good. He did get calls from like Penn State, but his grades weren't good enough to qualify for a Division I scholarship, so he had to go the JUCO route. This is going to be one of those stories. In this case, the story takes us to the Globe Institute of Technology, which is another entirely forgotten place in the world. It's not that far from Times Square in Manhattan, but it's just kind of tucked away in the hustle and bustle of that city, and you absolutely would not be able to pick it out if you had walked past it. It is another school that went defunct shortly after Jihad Ward left it. This is not a place where NFL dreams are churned out like a factory. And just as an aside, I think one of the most beautiful things about sports is that it is a place where we can bring together people who went to the Globe Institute of Technology and kids who went to IMG, who were part of blue blood schools and won national championships. You get somebody like J.J. McCarthy, who has taken the red carpet essentially all the way to the NFL, and compare it with someone like Jihad Ward. And hey, Jihad Ward is going into his 7th season, I think, as an NFL player. And like that, perfectly legitimate careers can still come even if you don't. Like, I think that's beautiful that this is possible. Maybe not common, but possible is, I think, the most we can ask for. But the Globe Institute of Technology is not Last Chance U either. I mean, we are talking like Greendale levels of legitimacy here. This is a school that advertised that you could be in New York and go to college there, and that their tuition was only $11,000 a year. And this was in like the mid 2010s. That's like obscenely low. That is like, we're cheap. It's like the Little Caesars model of like, it's here, sure is school. And part of the experience of going to the Globe Institute of Technology and trying to be a football player there was that the housing for this school, I mean, it's New York, right? Like if you're going to have housing for a school near Times Square, that's not exactly something that is going to be on the list of possibilities for the Globe Institute of Technology. So instead, they put kids up where they could, and they sent them around all the different boroughs of New York. In particular, Jihad Ward and 19 of his teammates lived in a couple of townhomes next to each other all the way on Staten Island. And if you look up Jihad Ward's story and, the flowery write-ups that a guy will get when he's like a top draft prospect, or, when he's the guy your team just traded for or whatever, you'll find a lot about his commute and how grueling his time was at the Globe Institute of Technology. He'll say it wasn't North Philly. He'll say, I grew up in North Philly. I'm tough enough for this. I can handle this. But when you really detail out what he went through in his JUCO years, it's astounding what this man has been able to accomplish. That'll be coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best place to find last-minute tickets to any event, whether it is a sporting event. If you want to try to check out a WNBA game, maybe Caitlin Clark is coming to town, or Angel Reese if you're real. Or you can find tickets to concerts, comedy shows, theater, whatever it is. And if you buy last minute, you can save up to 60% getting last minute tickets for any of these events, because at a certain point, people are just trying to get rid of their tickets, and Gametime knows how to navigate and take advantage of that market and pass those savings on to you. Here's the thing. They guarantee it. If you find the same section and row for that event somewhere else for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So make sure you check out gametime.co, gametime.co, or most people just use the app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for listening to the Locked On Vikings podcast. When you're done here, I encourage you to check out the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page, where you get some more traditional Vikings talk, as well as talk about the Timberwolves offseason, the Twins are going on, Wild offseason, and all that, Gophers, everything. Before we continue, I have a question to ponder. What makes somebody quit? Especially when it's something hard, like football. What makes somebody throw in the towel and say, I'm done here. I'm doing something else with my life? We hear so many stories, and I'm trying to combat the sort of survival bias that a series like this has, where you only hear about the times when it worked. You'll hear over and over, this is how hard this guy worked. And it's easy to sort of get used to it and take it for granted. Of course, he worked hard. He's an NFL player. And yeah, sure, all NFL players work very, very hard. Some will work harder than others, but you have to grade that on a curve because NFL players, on the whole, you can't get there without pushing yourself to the limit. And we never talk about the kids that don't make it. And I'm talking, high school kids that do this as an extracurricular activity, and then they're going into their junior year and bowing out because they're like, this isn't really worth all the effort. Or kids who maybe try to walk on at college and maybe they make it, but they're kind of a backup and they don't like the scout team. And they go, you know what? I'm at a D3 school. I got my scholarship, or maybe I didn't even get my scholarship. I just wanted to keep trying to play football, but I'm actually really enjoying my major and I'm seeing this girl now and I'm not going to do this anymore. Not to mention all the kids that just play it as an after school activity. And then after high school, they graduate, they're done with football and they just go off to do whatever they're going to do. But what trips in their mind when they decide I'm done here? And it's never, or I guess I should say it's rarely, a singular event. It's not, oh God, I had such a bad day, I just quit football. It's a building over time. It's the tedium of it. I think most people, if they were made to, right, held at gunpoint, could get out of bed and, run until their legs started to feel like jelly, right? And really push themselves into a good workout. I think most people are capable of that mentally. Pushing themselves to whatever they're physically capable of doing. But I think the harder thing is when that person, if you get really motivated and you do it one day, that's one thing. The hard thing is doing it over and over and over and over again in the same day. I think that's what gets kids to quit sports. It's the grueling grind. I remember complaining a lot. This puts things in perspective for me. I remember complaining a lot when I was just out of college. My first job had an hour and 15 commute in LA traffic, there and back. Hour 15 both ways. And I remember complaining a lot about it. I went through a whole bunch of podcasts. It takes a lot out of you. If you've ever had a commute that long, you know what I'm talking about. It really will wear over time on your mental health. And eventually I moved closer to that job, even though I couldn't really afford to because it was wearing so much on me. It really grinds on you. I got nothing on this. If you went to the Globe Institute of Technology and you were staying on Staten Island, first you got to get to the ferry. To get to the ferry, you got to get to the bus. To make the bus in time to get to the ferry so that you could get to all the other stuff, you probably got to get up before the sun comes up. You find a bus stop that's nearby. You take that and you go to the ferry station. We already hit a hurdle here because these kids are flat dead broke, especially Jihad Ward. He is dead broke. This is not college kid broke where your parents kind of help you out, but you're just got to learn how to deal with money for the first time. Parents have plenty of their own problems in North Philly. He has nothing. And they have to resort to all sorts of little tricks. You flash an old school ID and hope that they mistake it for your bus pass, or you just hope that the bus driver's in a good mood that day and they let you have a pass. If they don't, you maybe have a handful of pennies and you throw it in the change thing and hope that you can say, oh, no, that was a $2.75. Yeah. No, sorry, I didn't count it. I'm just going to go sit down and hope you get away with that. All kinds of little tricks to get on the bus, even though you maybe can't even afford bus fare that day. That is where we're at. There's somebody in my life that would describe this once. I don't know if I've heard it anywhere else as pancake mix poor, where what you're buying at the grocery store, at a certain point when literal dollars and cents are hard to come by. And you're no longer trying to get a balanced diet. You're just trying to get enough calories to have the energy to survive the day. We're in true survival mode. And pancake mix is something that you'll go for, or cake mix, because it's cheap and there's a ton of calories in a box, many meals in one box, right? It's not great for you. It's sugary, but you're just looking for calories at that point. And the mix-ins are nothing, even with cake mix. Like, oil is very cheap, right? You get like a dozen eggs. That'll last you a while. And so we're at this level. So you take the bus to the ferry, you get off the ferry, and then you go walk over to a train station where you have to go deal with a whole nother set of fares. And they got very good at like doubling up through the turnstile so that one subway pass could get two people through, and they would do it exactly like how you're supposed to attack a double team, where you like turn your shoulders and get skinny. And they said, yeah, it's all about technique. We got to get there. If they didn't have the money that day and they couldn't get through and the math didn't work out, they would try to hop the turnstile. But I mean, there's a lot of cops walking around, and there's like a bunch of very conspicuous, large black guys jumping the turnstile. You're not going to get away with it in New York City. Not with New York City cops. Like, that's not reasonable. So that is like a whole other host of problems. They did what they had to do because they wanted to make sure they got to practice on time. You get in trouble if you're late. So Jihad Ward did jump the turnstile here and there. He did get caught a couple times, had to pay the fine. And when your pancake mix poor, $100 fine can literally ruin your life. But he found a way. From buses to ferries to trains to long walks between all the different stops, he would eventually find his way to the Globe Institute of Technology, which he thought was a welfare office when he first walked into it. Like, it's this like dingy building that, again, is no longer Globe Institute of Technology. It went defunct shortly after Jihad Ward left. And he would do this ritual every day. He wouldn't get home. On the way back, he has to do all the other stuff on the way back. He wouldn't get home till like 11 p.m. Not to mention the grind of actual practice and lifting and trying to keep up with classes and all the other stresses that a college football player has to put up with. But he did it every single day. And a lot of kids in that situation would quit. This isn't worth it. I'll take online classes or something. And, get all these stresses out of my life. But he stuck with it. It's nothing compared to North Philly, right? Through all this, there was rarely a doubt in Jihad Ward's mind that he would eventually find a way to go D1. And he's got a reasonable argument, right? He's already been had colleges interested in him and probably would have gotten scholarships if he were academically eligible for it in high school. And he's only getting better, right? And he's only working harder and getting stronger and lifting more and more. So he knew that if he stuck with it, he would go D1. But an alumnus of the defunct Edward Bach Technical High, attending the soon-to-be defunct Globe Institute of Technology, isn't exactly going to be on anyone's radar. And it's at this point that Jihad Ward has the first stroke of luck in the whole story here. He sends what tape he has to colleges everywhere. And at Illinois, there's this guy named Bill Cubitt, who is a recruiter. He's from Sharon Hill, which is just outside Philly, and he is familiar with the street that's like on the address of the home address in North Philly where Jihad Ward grew up. It like catches his eye. And he's like, oh, he's from there. Like, I'm from there, kind of. And I'm from close to there. And he puts on the tape. It's grainy. You can't see anything. There's like 4 useful plays on it, but it's enough. It's intriguing. And he's like, okay, I can see this. But the stroke of luck is that there really kind of had to be a guy that recognized the name. Because otherwise, the Globe Institute of Technology envelope is going straight into the we don't have time for this kid pile. And I'm sure you get a lot of JUCO kids that just like shoot their tape out. And I'm sure a lot of people looked at Jihad Ward's tape and said, this guy's from where? Nah. Let's go look at another one from East Mississippi Community College. It got him a D1 offer. He got a scholarship. He went to visit Illinois, and he loved it. It was peaceful. It was quiet. This kid has been a city kid his whole life in the worst form of that. He has experienced all of the disgusting underbelly things that American urban areas have to offer. And the University of Illinois is like 140 miles outside of proper Chicago. There's farms around. You can smell the air. You can hear birds. He loved it. So he went to become a member of the Fighting Illini. Jihad Ward describes himself as something of a loose cannon when he's asked about certain stuff. Over the course of his career, there have been lots of little moments of jawing and, maybe like things caught on camera. And he says he's a live wire. That's the way he puts it. He says, I'm a live wire. I don't know what I'm going to get. Some days he's really locked in. He's really, just kind of head down, hard work. Some days he'll fly off the handle, and he says, that's kind of part of my game, right? Like there's an intensity to it. And yeah, I might like fly off the handle at you. That's because I'm athletic. I'm a defensive lineman. I'm a monster. Deal with it. I think that's pretty fair, and honestly, something he has in common with a lot of the great defensive linemen of all time. In Illinois, he felt doubted. And of course, right, as a JUCO kid, as a sort of reclamation project vibe, there's like a vibe to as a JUCO kid, there is a vibe of reclamation to you, right? There's a you didn't really go through the normal channels here. I talk about momentum a lot on these Everyman Series episodes where, you're a high school kid and then you get a D1 offer and then you go to college and then college works this way and then you go to the pros. There's a disruption to your momentum and all of that falls apart. And to kind of get back onto that track is always going to be difficult because there's always going to be a little bit of that you didn't do it the right way stink on you, whether it's fair for that to be the case or not. And that's not, to say nothing about Illinois coaches or anything like that. There's no accusations. It's just there's this air. There's that there's nothing anybody can do about it. And there's you kind of got to wash that off you. And Jihad Ward felt that. And he said, I got to arrive, right? I got to make an entrance. So early on in his first camp, they're doing a rushing drill, and he flattens the running back. He puts him to the turf, and he's yelling and hooting and hollering. And he says, that's like, then they realize pretty quick, oh, we got something in this kid. And, Bill Cubitt actually saw something and wasn't just going for a hometown guy. He kind of had a soft spot for, we found something. Total diamond in the rough kind of thing. It takes 4 or 5 weeks before he's regularly rotating in with the defense in his first year with the Fighting Illini, and he'll be a starter for them, and he'll be very productive, and he'll build like a real draft stock. It's pretty soon the JUCO thing is a story. It is the thing that gets aired on TV when in day 2 of the draft when they're trying to fill time, and they'll play sad piano music and have a talking head with your mother and. Drone shots of the nasty neighborhood you grew up in. He did get hurt his final year. He had to have a small arthroscopic surgery, which sort of deflated his draft stock. It was a short-term issue that just kind of happened at the worst time. So he would fall a little bit, but ultimately he will be an Oakland Raider. They had not yet moved to Las Vegas. He has been around a lot of teams since then. Before his third year, he got traded from the Raiders to the Dallas Cowboys, but he didn't make the Dallas Cowboys. He got cut, and he would end up on the Colts practice squad that year. He'd get elevated. He actually had a little hot streak. He had 3 sacks in 6 games as a practice squad guy, and they bring him back for the next year, but then he'll get cut in the middle of that year because it was just kind of a quick peak. And then he caught a little bit of traction in Baltimore after that for the rest of that year, which was 2019. And then he was in Baltimore for 2020 as well. They didn't sign him back. So in free agency, he signed with Jacksonville, makes a 1-year, $2.5 million deal, which sounds like a low amount of money to us. But I mean, put this in perspective for North Philly kid that had to scrounge for bus fare and try to trick the bus driver, pancake mix poor to $2.5 million in 6 years. That is, I think, a beautiful thing about NFL football because he can help his family now, and he does, and he has. He can stay connected with, the neighborhood where he grew up and his friends and all that stuff. And I mean, life will always throw different challenges at you, but I gotta imagine it's nice to no longer have to deal with those ones. In Jacksonville, he plays as like a rotational player, which is a step up from, draft bust who's like getting cut, right? This would be like a team suddenly being like, hey, Jalen Reagor, wide receiver 3, There's a little bit of a new building momentum just now as the veteran presence guy. After Jacksonville, he will go to New York for 2022 and 2023. He'll start around half the games there. So now he's going from a rotational player to like maybe a starter, and there were injuries and stuff, but like now he's getting some starting experience. So his stock has been building over the last few years. In 2023 in New York, the Giants and the Jets actually did a preseason game together. And there's this moment that I should probably mention. If you're a fan of Hard Knocks, this might be the thing that you like knew Jihad Ward from. He was like the guy that Aaron Rodgers said, "I don't know who you are" to. Do you remember that? So here's how this goes. And Jihad Ward is like really mad about how this got aired, which is kind of why I feel like compelled to tell the story with in a thing that's for his perspective. Because again, the goal here is to try to understand who this guy is, what he's been through, and the kind of person that will generate. But he's also a teammate and he's a football player. So here's how things go down. It's a preseason game. Randall Cobb has a blindside block on a teammate of Jihad Ward's. He will end up concussing this player, and he'll get the 15-yard flag for it. And it's a pretty bad hit. This is all documented on Hard Knocks. Initially, he's like, I was going sideways, but it's super, super flagrant. He'll get the penalty. I'm sure he got a fine too. And the show shows them going back to the huddle, and they're all like razzing him for making such a dumb mistake, for getting such a bad penalty. It's preseason, so it's chill. But it's like, come on, Randall, like, you know better than that. Now you're going to get a fine. You lost all your training camp money. So they're kind of taking it to heart. But I mean, that guy got a concussion. Like that did like inflict a serious injury onto somebody. So Jihad Ward didn't like the look of that blindside block. So not too long after, I think it was the next play, unless there was editing going on, he'll give Aaron Rodgers a little extra love tap very, very long after the play, right? And Aaron Rodgers gets right in his face. And he's like, what was that? Come on, dude. Really? You're doing that? Like, what is that? And Jihad Ward is basically doing it to stand up for his teammate, right? That's after, in hindsight, after the fact. And after the fact, he said he was pretty unhappy with how this segment came to pass because it made it look kind of out of nowhere. But he was like, this is a correlation causation thing. Like, absolutely a matter of cause and effect. This blindside block happens. He is going to go give the quarterback a little love tap and say, hey, don't mess with my guy, right? Rodgers says, this is where he says the infamous, like, I don't even know who you are, dude. Like, shut up, right? This is a preseason game, which for, at the time, a 6-year, I think that was a 6th year, NFL veteran, or no, that was a 7th year. This will be his 8th. Like, come on. Like, what a crazy thing to say to a guy that's been around that long. That drive will end in a touchdown, I believe, to Randall Cobb. No, it was a touchdown to Garrett Wilson. So that drive will end in a touchdown, and Aaron Rodgers goes right back up to Jihad Ward and says, I don't even know who you are. And he says, don't poke the bear. That's what he says about himself. And Jihad Ward's jawing right back at him, right? Now, look, this is trash talk that you will hear on an NFL field. They are not going up to each other and saying, good job, everybody, unless you're specifically Andrew Luck. They're going to say stuff like that to each other, and we just don't usually get to hear it because it's usually curated away from us by broadcasts, and even mic'd up segments will like take the nasty stuff out. But this is a show trying to be a little bit more hard edge, right? And Jihad Ward is very upset with how the perspective of this, I mean, it really paints him as like this villain, as this guy that like, talked a bunch of smack and couldn't back it up. And he was trying to stand up for his teammate. He's a man with like principles like that. Like he's sharpened his edge in one of the roughest places in the United States. And there Your friends are your family, and you stick up for your family no matter what. You have to stick together to survive. So it's not an option for Jihad Ward not to go up and get in Aaron Rodgers' face or Randall Cobb's face after an incident like that. And yeah, he's a little bit of a live wire about it, but that's just going to be who he is. At the end of the day, he doesn't really care about a segment like this one, about what we're going to say about him. Oh, is he going to make the team? Let's see. He's just a rotational guy. Like, what's his deal? He's kind of listing him off as a bunch of names that you wish the Vikings signed someone else instead of. He doesn't care. He's been through worse than a little bit of media criticism. He doesn't care. He never has. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, Skull.